G'day everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the PerthYP Podcast. This is the first episode, and our goal with this podcast is to engage and develop the PerthYP community. I'm joined today by a very good friend of mine. He's very experienced in the podcast game, and he's got a story or two to tell about moving from the corporate world into working for himself. Meng, thank you for joining me today. Now, firstly, do you prefer Meng-Han or Meng?
Meng's fine.
Meng's
Yeah,
fine.
Meng's fine.
Great. So welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Harvey.
I suppose the first thing we need to do is really get an understanding about your background.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing before your current state of employment, working for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and how did you go from getting from the cookie cutter sort of corporate professional job to working for yourself?
Sure. Well, the entire evolution of, I guess, my career really began from just free work experience. So my actual degree was in human resources and psych, but I kind of fell into the world of digital. So I started off doing work experience at like a website development company, just learning about digital marketing and all aspects of web and online. And from there, I sort of like picked out a particular niche that I wanted to sort of focus on, which was, or is actually search engine optimization. And I can explain a bit more of that later, but essentially from there, it was just really planning out like where I wanted to go in terms of the trajectory of my career. So I moved from where I first started to essentially an agency where they focused purely on that sort of field, on that particular niche. Mm-hmm. And then I sort of accumulated as much knowledge as I could. And then after that, I actually freelanced for a bit to just kind of get an idea of what the landscape was like for the industry, just to see how different agencies operated and, what kind of clients people were working with and their sort of like standard of process and all that kind of stuff. And then once I sort of had a really good feel about what was happening in the field, I wanted to know what it was like to work in-house in a corporate environment.
Right.
Because with the agency side, you're sort of like working for this business that services a lot of different businesses, right? So it's kind of really fast-paced. It's kind of really go. Whereas I wanted to see what it was like on the other side of the fence, where you only focus on like this one entity, this one single organization. So I took a stint at Bankwest. It was a fantastic workplace. And I sort of got a feel of what it was like I guess the real 180 of like going from this like really fast-paced hyper, like everything needs to be done all at once, to like this sort of like more of like a very strict slow burn where everything had to go through multiple checks and balances before things went through. And it was kind of like a real paradigm shift, because like even though the body of work is essentially the same, everything around it was very, very different.
Interesting. Okay. So it seems like this journey you had, it started with firstly knowing what you wanted to do.
Sure, yeah.
And then you did some of your own research, you invested your own time.
Correct.
And then, of course, you realize, okay, there's a couple of things I need to do before I need to get to where I really want to be.
That's right.
So let's start at the start there in terms of understanding what you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come about? Tell us about that journey. You said you stumbled upon it, or you kind of just fell into it.
Mm-hmm. How I first sort of fell into it was I was working as a bank teller, essentially, for a bank, and it was the worst job. Every day I'd wake up and just try and find an excuse not to go to work, that kind of feeling.
Okay.
And after a while, I was like, this isn't sustainable, because work is such a big part of your life. Like you really should be doing something that you're either interested in or really passionate about, or you can see yourself doing for quite a while to build a career on.
I agree.
And I was like, banking, or like actually retail banking wasn't it for me. So how I first started was I literally sat down and I made a list. And my list was things I was good at versus things that I would be interested in doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made this list, really trying to kind of be, self-analyze like my own skill sets, my own interests.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that came up was writing, because back then I really enjoyed writing. And one of the possible career prospects that I was looking at was to be like an ad writer, so an ad copywriter. So I started doing the research. Okay, well, what does it take to even be an ad copywriter? Think like sort of Mad Men style, like Don Draper, like, just throw out taglines.
Yeah.
So I did the research. I was like, what does it take to do this job? Because I don't have like a degree in English or communications or anything like that. So what does it take? And in my like research, I sort of discovered this thing called SEO copywriting, which is essentially writing copy for websites, essentially. So it was kind of like writing so that your website was like Google friendly.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking. And so I was like, I've never heard of this thing before. This seems really, really interesting. The concept of not just writing for humans, but for writing for like robots or machine learning sort of stuff. So I then just went down this like wormhole of learning about, well, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And discovering like there was a whole industry dedicated to this. And I thought, well, that's really cool. I would love to sort of like, sink my teeth into this.
Yeah, sure.
And that's how I sort of got started. And so from there, I kind of just wrote out like this email that I sent out to all these agencies in Perth going, hey, look, I'm really interested in learning about this. And I'm, willing to work for nothing to get that experience and learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference in especially a lot of people's careers, is being willing to do a lot for nothing.
Yeah.
Because it's important to you, or because it's important to getting to where you need to be. So, I mean, I understand not everyone has the time or ability to necessarily do that, because everyone has bills to pay.
Sure.
But I think, going the extra mile there in your own time, even to research, that's super important. Something that I did as well along the way of my career journey is to really spend my own time, invest and learn about what it takes. Like same to you. What does it take to get to being a search engine optimization specialist?
Yeah.
What does it take to be a investment banker? What does it take to be a program manager or a project manager or something along those lines?
Exactly.
What did you learn from your time with Bankwest?
For me, Bankwest was a way to sort of see what it was like to be involved really with like a large scale organization, and how, I guess, the dynamics of internal politics, because that was something I was really interested in. Okay. Because with agency, what happens is, because everything's so like sort of fast paced and everything's go, like people sort of just say exactly what needs to be said, and opinions fly out, and you don't have to really worry about sort of being very aware of, I guess, censoring yourself in a lot of the time. Yep. Whereas with an organization like any bank, there's a lot of sort of, legal red tape, there's a lot of office politics, and I guess it was just like I really want to know what it was like to be sort of a part of that. Yeah. And to see like the dynamics of, I guess, the working processes, or how an organization has so many different departments sort of come together and work together, and what that line of communication is like. Exactly. And I suppose that would help later on when you go to freelance or work for yourself. Mm-hmm. You understand what processes they have to go through. So I suppose you can relate better to your clients. You can provide something that is more relevant to your clients than perhaps your competitors. Yeah. Okay, you've moved back into freelancing and working for yourself. Mm-hmm. To understand that decision, tell us a bit about, what did you consider when leaving Bankwest to then go and work for yourself again? Right. So the decision to actually work for myself was actually a long time in the making. So it was actually before I chose to work at Bankwest. I had the idea or the concept really to work for myself around the time that, probably around 3 years into my career. What it was, the catalyst for it, was the discovery that what really defines how much you enjoy work is kind of two elements, which is sort of how good and how much you enjoy the body of work itself, and also the people that you surround yourself with, because you spend more time with the people that you work with than any of your loved ones, right? So 40 hours a week, like with the same people, that's a lot more than even your own family, right? So who you surround yourself with was very important. And I was fortunate enough in the fact that all the places that I've worked with in my sort of career were just very, very lovely people that I just really got along with. But the one sort of consistent factor was this breakdown of maybe communication, or maybe it's just, I guess, I wouldn't say lack of respect, but just like this lack of understanding of the workers and management. So in most of the places I've worked at, from an agency perspective, there's like one or two sort of top level like directors, and then you've got your middle line managers, and then everyone else that sort of like does all the grunt work, or, you know, are specialists in their particular field. And one of the, I guess, pain points for a lot of workers is the fact that they feel that their managers are either not suitable to be leaders, or they feel like the leaders are very out of touch with the work that's required. Because a lot of times what tends to happen is that, especially with sort of more smaller or boutique agencies, is like the manager or the director or whatever, the owner, is the person that bills and quotes for all the body of work, and then goes, okay, so this is how much I want to charge, and then gives it to his employees to do. What tends to happen is like these people that own these agencies themselves, they come from that background because they used to do that work, right? Sure. So they technically should understand the intricacies and the skills required and the amount of work that's required. But what tends to happen is, because of the fact that this industry moves at such an alarmingly fast rate and things evolve and change, is that the processes and the body of work that you would have required to do back then is very different to what is required now. And so what tends to happen is that there's that lack of understanding of what really does need to be done. And then you kind of get that, well, should you really be telling me what my body of work is worth, or like what my services are worth, or like, are you really the best person to lead me when you don't even take the time to understand that? Because obviously at an ownership level, you have to be aware of, like, you have to be in charge of so many responsibilities like admin and, you know, sales and managing people. Like, you hardly have any time. You won't have any time to do to
actually do it.
To actually do the work stuff. Exactly. And also, I've just discovered that some people, as good as they are, some people just shouldn't be managers. Some people just shouldn't lead other people because they only know how to micromanage or how to sort of dictate or tell people what to do, but don't know actually how to lead. Okay. And so that was like a consistent factor I found moving from, you know, agency to agency to agency. It was like just this group of people at the bottom. I say at the bottom, but like group of workers that loved working each other and loved the environment, but was sort of kind of unhappy with upper management.
Sure.
And so when I saw that, it kind of drove me to go, well, I really want to create an environment where you have a leader or this kind of almost like a captain, where there's like a trust, and there isn't this like dynamic where it's like me versus them and just do what I say. It's like I have this vision for us and I want us to work collaboratively, and that there's a trust that because you trust that I know exactly what's happening and what I'm doing, that we work together, and that you won't feel like you're undervalued or that I don't know sort of what you're going through.
Okay, yeah. That's really important. And I think sometimes that gets lost in, you know, big organizations. And I've found in my experience that, you know, leadership is so important. Yeah. Having the right leadership either defines, one, how successful the team or the organization will be. Yeah. That trust is super important. And then also people either stay or leave based on leadership. I don't think it's you know, of course pay comes into it at some point, but assuming that your pay's all right and the people are all right, it really does come down to leadership. So that's very important for the long-term sustainability of the team and the organization. So that's great. Thanks for tuning in to the first half of this podcast. Tune in 2 weeks' time for the second half.